The morning Leah found the contract, she was looking for a pen. That was it. No dramatic premonition, no cold feeling in her chest the night before. She was just standing in Martin's home office, barefoot, on the hardwood floor, rummaging through the top drawer of his desk, because she needed something to sign for the school's parent consent form. And there it was, a thick manila envelope with the name of a real estate firm printed in the upper left corner. She almost put it back. She almost told herself it was nothing. But the address printed on the first page was the same address she'd grown up in, the same address where her mother had spent 41 years. The house on Crestwood Lane that her mother had left to her, in writing, 2 years before she passed. Martin Hale had listed it for sale without telling her. The papers were dated 3 weeks ago. The closing was scheduled for the following Friday. Leah stood there so long her feet went cold. She set the envelope back exactly the way she found it. She walked to the kitchen, put a glass under the faucet, filled it with water, and drank the whole thing without stopping. Then she set the glass down very carefully, like she was afraid of making a sound, and she sat at the kitchen table and stared at nothing for the better part of an hour. She had been married to Martin for 9 years. She had put him through the last 18 months of his MBA, because her salary as a speech pathologist covered their rent while he finished. She had taken the smaller half of the closet without being asked. She had learned to like the thermostat at 68 degrees because that's what he preferred. She had driven to his mother's house every Thanksgiving for 9 years, even though it was 4 hours away, and his mother had never once asked how she was doing. She had done all of that, and he had taken the house her mother left her and put it on the market without saying a single word. She thought about calling her sister. She thought about crying. She didn't do either. What she did was go back to the office, take a photo of every page of that contract with her phone, and then go put on her shoes because she had a 10 a.m. client. The thing people don't understand about Leah Whitfield is that she was never the kind of woman who made noise. She wasn't passive. She just didn't believe in announcing herself before she was ready. She had grown up with a mother who said that the loudest person in the room is usually the most scared. And she'd watched that hold true enough times that she'd made it a guiding principle. She observed. She listened. She waited until she understood the full picture before she opened her mouth. It had made her a good speech pathologist. She could sit with a 6-year-old who hadn't spoken a word in 3 years and find the thread. Some small opening, some particular sound he wasn't afraid of, and follow it until the words started to come. Her patient's parents always asked her how she did it. She told them patience, but that wasn't quite right. It was closer to attention. She paid attention the way most people couldn't afford to. She had paid attention to Martin for 9 years. She'd noticed the shift about 8 months ago, though she'd felt the beginning of it before that. The way he had stopped asking about her day, not suddenly but gradually, the way a faucet drips slower and slower, until one morning you realize you haven't heard it in weeks. The way he had started going to the gym at 6 in the morning, which he'd never done before in 9 years of marriage. The way his phone had started going face down on every table in every room. The way he'd look past her when she spoke, just a fraction of a second too long, like he was waiting for her to finish. She had been watching all of it. She just hadn't been ready to name it yet. After she found the contract, she was ready. She called a lawyer that same afternoon. Not a friend of a friend. Not someone Martin might know through work. She went to the state bar's referral directory and picked a name she'd never heard before. A woman named Sandra, who practiced family law out of an office on the east side of the city. She made the appointment for the following Tuesday. She told no one. In the meantime, she went home each evening and made dinner and asked Martin about his day and listened to him talk. She watched him. She ate across the table from him and felt something hollow and heavy in her chest that she couldn't quite name. Not grief, not yet, and not quite anger either. Something older than both of those. Something that felt, if she was being honest, like a woman watching a house burn down and realizing she'd smelled smoke for months. Sandra had an office that smelled like coffee and the kind of file cabinet order that Leah found deeply comforting. She was small and precise and did not waste words. Leah put the photos of the contract on the desk between them. Sandra looked at them for a long time without speaking. Then she looked up. "This property," she said. "Tell me the ownership history." Leah told her. Her mother had purchased the house in 1979. When her father passed in 2011, the house remained in her mother's name. When her mother died 2 years ago, the house passed to Leah through a properly probated will. It was never put in both spouses' names. Leah had never signed anything transferring an ownership interest to Martin. Sandra nodded slowly. Then this listing is going to have a problem. Can he do this, legally? He cannot sell a property he doesn't own, and based on what you've described, he doesn't own it. Sandra paused. But the fact that he tried to suggests he was either very confident you wouldn't find out before closing, or he had helped creating documentation that doesn't exist. Leah felt the cold thing in her chest sharpen. "What do I need to do?" Sandra told her. It wasn't simple, but it wasn't impossible either. They needed to contact the title company immediately to flag the transaction. They needed to pull all marital financial records before Martin could move anything. And they needed to file for legal separation before Friday, because Friday was the scheduled closing date, and if that closing somehow proceeded, untangling it would take significantly longer and cost significantly more. "I want you to understand what you're starting," Sandra said. She said it without drama, just very clearly. "I know what I'm starting," Leah said. She did. She'd known since she was standing in his office with the contract in her hands. She just hadn't let herself say it until now. She went home that night, and Martin was on the couch watching television. He asked if she wanted to order Thai. She said sure. They ate on the couch, and he laughed at something on the show, and she sat next to him and thought about the house on Crestwood Lane. The screen door that stuck in summer, the way the light fell through the kitchen window in the late afternoon, the smell of her mother's garden in July, and she kept her face very still and her breathing very even, and when he asked if she was tired, she said a little, "Just work." She started sleeping lightly. She'd always been a sound sleeper. One of the things Martin had said he loved about her in the beginning, that she fell asleep fast and slept clean through, that she wasn't one of those people who woke at every sound. Now she lay awake, listening to his breathing, listening to him shift, listening to the small sounds of the house. 3 nights in, she heard him get up at 2 in the morning. She heard him take his phone to the bathroom. She heard the murmur of his voice through the wall, low and careful, for 22 minutes. She did not get up. She did not press her ear to the wall. She lay still and she memorized the time and the duration, and when he came back to bed and said nothing, she said nothing too. In the morning she texted Sandra. Her colleague Donna was the first person who knew, and only because Donna had known Leah for 11 years and could read her in ways that were occasionally inconvenient. They were eating lunch in the break room. Donna put down her fork and said, "What's going on with you?" Leah looked up. "Nothing, Leah." She looked at Donna for a moment. Then she said, "I found out my husband listed my mother's house for sale without telling me. The closing is in 2 days." Donna stared at her. "I've already talked to a lawyer," Leah added. Donna's expression moved through several stages quickly and then settled into something focused and very still, which was Donna's version of devastated. "How long have you been sitting on this?" 10 days. 10 days. Donna closed her eyes briefly. "Leah, I wasn't ready to talk about it. Are you ready now?" "A little." Donna reached across the table and covered Leah's hand with hers. She didn't say, "I'm so sorry," or "I can't believe him," or any of the other things people say when they don't know what else to do. She just said, "Tell me what you need." It was the exact right thing. What Leah needed was someone to sit with her dog on Friday while she was at the attorney's office. What she needed was someone to know, so that she wasn't carrying it completely alone. What she needed, though she didn't say this part out loud, was to hear her own voice say it to another person, so that it was real in a way it hadn't quite been yet. Saying it to Sandra had been necessary. Saying it to Donna made it true. The closing did not proceed. Sandra's office contacted the title company on Wednesday morning, and by Wednesday afternoon, the transaction had been halted pending resolution of the ownership dispute. Martin got a call from the real estate agent at 4:15. Leah was at work when it happened. She found out later, from Sandra, that he had called the agent back 3 times in 1 hour. She drove home that evening, not knowing quite what she would find. She found Martin in the kitchen, standing at the counter, and the energy in the room was different from anything she'd felt in 9 years of marriage. He was holding his phone, and his jaw was tight, and he looked at her when she came in with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Not anger exactly, something more like a person who has just realized the ground is not where they expected it to be. "The closing got flagged," he said. "I know," she said. The silence that followed was one of the longer silences of her life. "You went to a lawyer," he said. "I did." He set the phone down. He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Lower, more careful. "I was going to tell you." She looked at him. She looked at the person she had been married to for 9 years. She thought about the 2 a.m. phone call. She thought about the envelope in the drawer. She thought about what Sandra had said. He was either very confident you wouldn't find out, or he had help. "You were going to tell me after," she said. "Not before." He didn't deny it. He opened his mouth and then closed it again, and she watched him decide not to say the thing he'd been about to say, and then watched him try to find a different thing. "We can talk about this," he said finally. "We're talking now," she said. He said her name the way people say a name when they're trying to get traction, trying to make something feel personal and close. "Leah." She picked up her bag from the counter. She'd already moved the things she needed. Documents, her laptop, a few things that mattered, to Donna's house over the past 3 days, a little at a time, nothing dramatic. There was nothing in this house she needed tonight that she hadn't already moved. "Sandra will be in touch," she said. She left. She stayed at Donna's for 2 weeks, and then she stayed with her sister Renata in. She almost laughed at herself for using the word exile. Renata lived 40 minutes away in a house that smelled like dinner and had 2 kids and a husband who did the dishes without being asked, and Leah slept in the guest room and woke up each morning to the sound of small children fighting over the bathroom and felt, in some strange way she couldn't fully articulate, more at peace than she had in years. She had not cried yet. People kept waiting for her to cry. She cried once, alone, in the shower at Renata's house on the 4th night. It lasted about 4 minutes and was mostly about her mother, the house on Crestwood Lane, the specific smell of the guest room there, the idea that Martin had been willing to hand that to a stranger for money without once thinking about what it meant to her. It wasn't really about Martin at all, and she thought about that afterward, the way grief finds the oldest losses first. After that she was mostly fine, not happy, not whole, but functional in a way she recognized as genuine rather than performed, which she took as a sign that she was going to be okay. Martin's attorney reached out to Sandra twice in the first week. The calls were described to Leah as exploratory. She told Sandra not to settle anything until they had a complete accounting of every joint financial account. The accounting took another 2 weeks. What came back was not a complete surprise, but it was clarifying in the way that X-rays are clarifying. You'd suspected something, and now you could see the shape of it clearly. Martin had been transferring money from their joint savings account into a separate personal account for at least 14 months. Not dramatic amounts, $50 here, $100 there. Once, $400. Small enough to not trigger a flag, consistent enough that, added up, it came to just over $18,000. Sandra looked at Leah when she told her the number. Leah nodded slowly. "You're not surprised," Sandra said. "I'm not unsurprised," Leah said. "I knew something was there. I didn't know the number." The woman in Martin's phone, the one he'd been calling from the bathroom at 2 a.m., turned out to work in his office. Her name was Petra, no last name yet, and Leah didn't particularly want it. She didn't want to know anything about her. She didn't feel rage toward her. What she felt, which surprised her a little, was something closer to indifference. A clean, clear indifference, like what you feel when a door closes and you realize you weren't going through it anyway. The mediation was scheduled for a Thursday morning in October, in a conference room that smelled like carpet cleaner and recycled air. Martin came in with his attorney and did not look at Leah when he sat down. She had not seen him in 6 weeks. He looked smaller than she remembered. Not physically he was the same, but there was something reduced about him, something that registered around the eyes, and she thought about all the confidence she had watched him carry through 9 years of marriage. The way he had walked into rooms like the room had been expecting him, and now here he was not quite meeting her gaze in a conference room in October. She felt nothing she hadn't already processed. Sandra had prepared her for 3 possible outcomes. Martin's attorney opened with the one that was least generous to Leah. Sandra responded without raising her voice. Leah sat with her hands folded on the table and watched and said nothing unless Sandra turned to her, which Sandra did occasionally, not for performance but because there were factual questions that required Leah's answer. They went through the house on Crestwood Lane. Martin's attorney argued that 9 years of marriage established a marital interest. Sandra presented the will, the probate documentation, and the fact that the property had never been titled jointly. She also presented the contract Martin had signed with the listing agent, signed under a representation of ownership that was not accurate, and she said the words fraudulent misrepresentation in a tone that was entirely calm and entirely deliberate. Martin's attorney said something to Martin in a low voice. Martin said something back. His attorney said something else. Leah watched Martin's face during all of this. She watched him understand, incrementally, what the documentation meant. She watched him get to the place she had gotten to 3 weeks earlier, when Sandra had laid out the same facts for her. The place where you see that the thing you thought you were building doesn't exist. His attorney suggested a recess. During the recess, Leah went to the vending machine down the hall and got a water, and stood by the window and looked out at the parking lot. Donna had texted twice. Her sister had texted. She texted them both back, still going, okay, and then she put her phone away. She thought about her mother. She thought about the Crestwood Lane house, the screen door, the late afternoon kitchen light. She thought about what her mother used to say. The loudest person in the room is usually the most scared. She hadn't raised her voice once in this whole thing, not when she found the contract, not when she walked out, not today. She finished the water and went back in. The mediated agreement took 3 hours in total. Leah kept the house on Crestwood Lane. There was no version of the negotiation where that was ever in doubt. Sandra had made sure she understood that before today, but having it finalized in writing felt different than knowing it in theory. The judge who would later sign off on the divorce decree would make it official, but this was the moment that mattered. She also kept her half of the joint savings minus the amount Martin had moved, which his attorney eventually agreed to return after a quiet conversation about the alternative. She kept her car, her retirement account, a few pieces of furniture that had come from her family's home. She didn't want the couch. She didn't want the television. She didn't want any of the things they'd chosen together from the furniture store in that first apartment. She realized, sitting in the conference room, that she couldn't remember a single purchase she'd genuinely loved. Martin kept the rest. He could keep it. None of it had ever felt like hers in a way she wanted to hold on to. They did not speak to each other directly during the session. They passed things through the attorneys. When it was over, he looked at her once. Not a long look, just a second. The kind of look that might have been an apology, or might have been something else she didn't have words for. And then he walked out with his attorney and the door closed behind him. Leah sat in the chair for a moment after everyone else had stood up. Sandra touched her arm. "You okay?" "Yes," she said. And it was true. She had been renting a small house in a neighborhood she'd always liked, waiting for the paperwork to clear, waiting for the life that was already in motion to fully arrive. The rental had a front porch, and a neighbor who grew tomatoes, and a dog door that her dog had figured out in approximately 11 seconds. The first weekend she brought boxes to Crestwood Lane. Her mother's house, her house. Her sister came to help. They worked through the afternoon without the radio on, just the two of them, and the familiar sounds of the house. And at some point Leah sat down on the floor of the kitchen and leaned against the cabinet, and Renata sat down next to her, and they didn't say anything for a while.
"Do you feel better?"
Renata asked finally. Leah thought about it honestly. "Not better," she said. "Different. Like I know where I am now." Renata nodded. She understood. The screen door stuck, same as it always had. The late afternoon light came through the kitchen window the same way it always had. When the wind moved through the yard in a particular direction, Leah could still smell something faintly green and floral that she associated, in a way she had never tried to put into words, with safety. She was 39 years old. She was starting over in the house where she had started, and that was not the story she had planned, and she had decided, not bravely, not dramatically, just quietly and with full attention, that it was enough. It was more than enough. It was hers.